This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD via Zoom, Margo Jacquot. She is with the Juniper Center. First of all, welcome, Margo, and tell us, are you the founder or the owner of the Juniper Center?
Morning. I am both. I am the founder and the owner.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about the Juniper Center and how it is different from other mental health organizations.
Oh, I love that question. So the Juniper Center is a multi-site. We have 6 locations currently. They are mental health clinics. We have a team. Part of what makes us different is we have a team of prescribers. So we have 2 psychiatrists and 3 advanced practice nurse practitioners. Our size is definitely something that sets us apart. We have over 80 clinicians. We have clinicians who are in Florida, California, Indiana. So some folks all over the country. We have people who work downstate in Illinois. We have a large team of people who just work telehealth, and then we have a child and adolescent team, we have a trauma team, we have an addictions team. So we really we have a queer team, we really try to meet as many needs as we can. Our goal is to get really good care into the hands of as many people as is humanly possible.
And then how much further need is there? You do your best, but um, how much more need is there? And that we all need.
There's a huge need. I'll tell you. I mean, I've been doing this for 35 years, and the need was there when I started, and that would have been in the mid-90s. And here we are now. It started as just me. I think the evolution of our practice just sort of reflects how the need has grown and changed. We have added clinicians as the need has grown. If we get more calls, if we get more contacts, the need has grown exponentially. And then when the pandemic hit, it just exploded. And part of it is, I think the need has always been there, quite frankly, but there was so much stigma around getting mental health care. And it meant that people were, in quotes, crazy, as opposed to, you're having a hard time, you're struggling in your marriage, you're having difficulty with your child is having a hard time, you have anxiety, you have eating problems, you have an addiction. So now the stigma has reduced quite a bit, I think, thank goodness. And so people are more willing to reach out. So it's kind of both. The need is greater, especially since the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, and the stigma has gone away some. So people are more likely to reach out.
In other words, because of the pandemic actually helped the stigma go away some.
It did. It did. And partly it's generational. So Gen Z, I think, is breaking down a lot of barriers that were in existence before about things like everybody ought to work themselves to the bone. They don't have the work-life balance is really important to them. And they talk about their mental health. So they are educating us, their parents, grandparents, they're educating us. My kids are very fluent, not just because of me, but because of their friends and the conversations they have in emotions and mental health and good mental health.
Mm-hmm. And for instance, students in school, when they visit their counselor, oftentimes it's not only to visit them for about their studies, about school, it's also to find someone to converse with. And then later on, if they need help with mental health, then they have to move on to something beyond like a school counselor. But basically, when they start having some rapport with somebody out of their family and in a position of authority, isn't that oftentimes a school counselor?
That's often the first person they'll go to is if it's not a friend, another adult or Another, an adult is often their school counselor. And typically now in schools, the counselors are more for, it might be the very entry point, and then they might be referred in-house to the school social worker.
Mhm.
And once they've seen the school social worker for a little while, then they might be referred out to an outside clinic. So that's typically the progression, but yes, definitely. It can start with the counselor. They have such a crucial role, school counselors and social workers. They see so much, they can have such a huge impact, and having good connections with clinics and providers outside of the school is great because they can have hundreds of students on their caseload and they just can't meet all of the needs. So, but yes, they're often the first point of contact. I have great respect for school social workers and counselors.
Mhm. What about when students are referred out to clinicians? Uh, has that stigma lessened somewhat too after the pandemic?
Yes, and
Is the stigma still there?
well, the stigma is still there, and some of it is cultural. Um, and some of it has to do with socioeconomic status, and I think there are still variables that impact some of that stigma. Certainly being in a large metropolitan area where the stigma is less likely to be there because people are just exposed to more variety in their day, different types of people. So yeah, I mean, the stigma still does exist. I don't want to speak to it as if it has evaporated, it's gone, it's demolished. It's still a work in progress, but there has been great movement, lots of movement. I'm thrilled about that. There are more conversations in different communities. We've had some people who have spoken for events for us who are talking about African American men and mental health, or in different cultures, just some of the roadblocks that come from just cultural variables that people have grown up with themselves as parents or grandparents. So it's definitely a work in progress. But the fact that these services are available and there is so much conversation in schools makes an enormous difference for the kids because they will start to seek out help. They'll start looking online. They'll look at YouTube videos. They will look for podcasts. They look on Instagram. They look for people they can follow who are pro mental health and mental health services. So thank goodness for that. I think that's a great change.
Mhm. When people reach out for help in mental health, sometimes it seems as if people are have more income, then they're able to access a clinician, while the working poor, they're just so uh, busy making ends meet, and in to find the mental health that they need. So how are we able to reconcile these two, and how does the Juniper Center play into that?
I love that question. So we are very insurance friendly, but that means you have to have insurance, and most insurance either comes through the exchange, but that's expensive, the government plans, or through one's employer. So if you have a good job and they have a good plan, you can get good care. Well, as we know, that's going to create all sorts of access for some, blockage for others. So that has really been difficult for me over the years. And I've been looking for a way to provide that care to people who need it. Most of us have people on our caseload who have no money, they have no job, but we can only have one or two because the therapist has to pay their bills too. And we don't have outside funding sources, we don't have grants in a private practice, those things don't exist. That's a social service agency, a community mental health center that have long wait lists. It's hard to get access there too. So our way of approaching this, I started looking into what would it take for a for-profit organization like ours to develop a not-for-profit arm. And so about a year and a half ago, we were able to start the Bridging the Gap Collective. And it started just as a seed idea with the intention of just those folks you're describing who don't have money, who can't afford the copay, they don't have insurance, don't have good insurance, or they have Medicaid. And the waiting list for Medicaid is huge in most organizations. There has to be a better way. So the Bridging the Gap Collective came along as a way to provide free therapy for people who don't have those resources. And all they have to do to qualify is call us, let us know that they need care. They don't have to produce a bunch of documentation. We're not going to check all their references. They just need to say, look, we want some therapy. We can't afford it. What do we do? And now the Bridging the Gap Collective is there to bridge that gap. And the gap is those who can afford and those who can't. And the solution is that bridge. So I love the name. I didn't come up with it. I think our executive director and perhaps other people on the board did that, but that's Ms. Elise McFadden was a part of that process. And I think it's just the perfect name.
You spoke about a waiting list. So when you talk about Medicaid, if people were on Medicaid and needed to see a therapist, what is that waiting list?
Waiting lists can be months minimally.
Oh, waiting list for the therapist. Their therapist is like the roster, the queue. So they enter the queue and it's a long queue, is what you're saying.
Long queue, exactly right. They are waiting in line to get care. So if they're having a mental health crisis, they might end up in the ER, or they might end up, especially if it's a chronic mental illness, like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, some of the more serious ones. These are folks who end up in, the jail overnight because somebody calls the police on them. I mean, it's a complicated system. It's very hard because Medicaid does not allow a private provider unless you are paneled with them, unless you're in their system.
Preferred vendor list, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And there's it's very complicated to get on, but once you're on, it's also not easy because there's a lot of paperwork. Many agencies don't want to take that on. Sometimes Medicaid will come along and say, oh, you didn't fill this form out correctly. We want thousands of dollars back. It's a complicated system and the wait lists are long, meaning, just to your point, people are in a queue, their name is on a list, and until it can take weeks, months, sometimes a year before there's an opening with a therapist. And then you don't have any choice. You don't get to choose who your therapist is. It's just whoever has an opening, they have a spot. And sometimes it's the right person for you and sometimes it isn't. So, because everybody, as therapists, we have different specialties, different things we're good at like anybody else. So it's not a great system. And this Bridging the Gap Collective is intended to help some of those people find good care, match them up with somebody who is going to do the kind of work that they need, that they can feel connected to, and get really good care that's going to help them be able to move on in their life.
Is the Juniper Center trying to get onto that preferred vendor list? I know you said that it's very difficult and it's an involved process.
We've been working on it for 2 years. So it's, and part of that is just, we're super busy with the clients that we have. It's our billing department. Our billing manager has been great, but getting the response back. So we send in the forms, nothing comes back. It's just, it will get there. But yes, we're trying to get to that point too, because if we can become Medicaid providers, we already accept Medicare, but if we can become Medicaid providers, that will create more access. But even folks who are, not everyone is on Medicaid. Just because someone is, poor doesn't mean, doesn't have income or is unhoused or whatever the situation is, does not mean that they can access Medicaid resources either, because that's a whole process as well. And if someone isn't helping you go through that process, it can be really tough and people get discouraged, understandably.
How long is the queue for people with the better insurance?
So that during the height of the pandemic, it was very hard to find care. That has changed some. It depends on if you need a specialist or a generalist. Generalists obviously are easier to find. Specialists, there can still be a queue, but it's much shorter. It can be a matter of a couple of weeks versus months. So that has gotten significantly better as the pandemic has waned. And part of it is there are more providers. People have come and gone for the acute care that they needed. We've hired a lot more providers. So I think there's just greater access at this point too.
It usually takes quite a while before someone is willing to acknowledge that they do need mental health help. And then it will take another amount of time to maybe speak to someone and actually act on getting the mental health help that they need. Then they still have to go many times. A lot of these people have to enter that queue and still wait a long time. It seems as if it will take a very long time before someone gets the mental health care that they need.
Certainly can. And the better your insurance, especially, so for example, in the commercial plans, like everyone in the Chicagoland area, all providers, if they accept insurance, they accept Blue Cross Blue Shield. There are other plans that people don't want to take because they're difficult to deal with. The reimbursement is lower. It doesn't make sense for them to take it. So even within the commercial insurance arena, there are people who have a hard time finding access if they don't have the right plan, because some of them don't pay well and they're hard to deal with. They do audits, they do other things that make it difficult. So yeah, even if you have good insurance, it can be hard.
By if they pay well, you mean that they reimburse quickly, right, to the provider?
They reimburse quickly and they reimburse at a level that makes a living affordable, because a therapist, most therapists don't see 40 clients a week, right? The average work week is 37 to 40 hours a week. We would be burnt to a crisp. Can't keep track of people. You don't remember who's telling you what. There's notes to do, there's phone calls to be had. So on average, 25 clients a week is pretty typical. And there's a lot of overhead that goes into having a practice. So being able to see 25 clients a week, even that feels like the upper limit. So it can be hard just from that perspective. We can't see as many people even as we would like. But so being able to get reimbursement that then can make a living wage, you're really kind of working half time. You're earning half time, only half, what would be considered a half-time job in most other industries. So they have to pay enough for people to be able to cover their bills. And there are a lot of therapists right now leaving the field because they are burnt out and they aren't making enough money. And I think the average consumer doesn't understand just how much overhead, liability insurance, rent, an electronic health record system. There's so much that goes into it that people aren't really rolling in cash for sure. So.
Why did you choose the juniper, the tree, the juniper? Juniper in Asian lore is like a very old tree, a very wise tree, a kind of a sacred tree. Is there any significance to choosing juniper for the Juniper Center?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that. Frequently people will confuse us and confuse our name and say, oh, it's the Jupiter Center. No, it's not the planet. It is the tree. And it's just that. Junipers grow out of rocks. They dig these beautiful sculptured sort of root systems back in to get sustenance out of just about nothing. I mean, how do you get water out of a rock? So, but they do, and they survive and they thrive and they're hardy. And I think of them as wisdom. So yes, that was exactly the significance. Thank you for asking that.
Did you yourself have a juniper in your home in where you live?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I have a little juniper tree. At the office, we have, I don't think we have any live juniper trees at the moment, but we have um, sculptures, we have pictures. It's the symbolism is really infused throughout. I love it.
Oh, I meant, before the Juniper Center came into being, did you have, in your experience, were you able to like walk by and examine and be in the company of junipers?
Actually hadn't been. I wasn't actually in the company of juniper trees until probably 10 years ago.
Mm,
So, and we had been in existence already for 20 years. So
mm,
the first several years I had not that I knew of. I probably was and didn't recognize them. I have spent a lot of time hiking in woods, on cliffs. So I probably walked right past them and didn't realize, I looked at them and liked them, but didn't realize what they were.
mm,
And once I read about them and discovered what they were, I just started having this incredible reverence for that experience of that tree and the
mm,
symbolism of it.
mm. For the Bridging the Gap Collective, could you explain to our listeners in what way is that a gap bridged? And uh, I know that you have interns as well. Explain a little bit about the process and how you hope to bridge the gap.
So this was an idea of Ms. Elise McFadden, who again is our executive director, as we were thinking about who will staff Bridging the Gap. Currently we have fully licensed and provisionally licensed therapists who are providing that care. The goal is to also infuse interns, people who have completed a large part of their schooling, but now they need to go out into the community. They need to go out into the world and practice, essentially. And those experiences as an intern, I've been an intern, I was an intern many times, I'm a psychologist, so we have 3 or 4 experiences where we have to go do internships. And some of those training experiences are good and some aren't. Many of them are not culturally sensitive, culturally informed. You don't learn cultural competency. So the goal here, nor do you get decent supervision, quite frankly. So the goal here is to take really good therapists who are good supervisors, who can also, and then these might be separate people, who will help these interns learn cultural competence. And just because we belong to a community, whether we're a person of color, a queer person, whatever, that does not make us competent in treating someone. It just makes us competent to live in our own skin. So we're trying to help people have that competency to be able to go out and to work with these clients in communities, provide the services that people really need, get excellent supervision, and learn about how to be a really good therapist. That's a main focus of the training portion and a main portion of the goal. So we're bridging the gap not only for clients, but we're bridging the gap for clinicians who are in training to become really good clinicians as well.
Mhm. How do you know how they balance the task? Of course, interns are very helpful in miscellaneous tasks to save their mentor, their supervisor's time. How are they able to learn the daily regimen of a therapist in addition to just being an intern and being a gopher and doing a lot of these more mundane tasks.
Yeah, we don't actually use our interns as gophers, and I'm glad you brought that up because there are lots of places that might.
Mhm,
Everything that we ask people to do, it's an ask. We don't require people to do grunt work or that sort of thing. So they function just like any other therapist on our team. They can attend any meeting that they want. They are required to attend supervision, but we ask them to do the clinical work, and that's it. That's their job with us. It's our job to train them. We might encourage them to read certain things, to attend certain trainings, to help boost their competency, but that's really it. They function just like a regular therapist, but they have a lot of oversight in terms of their clinical work.
So are they able to work with clients in a therapist setting?
Oh, absolutely. That's the main goal, is to
Mhm.
have them work with the clients in the setting. And people are a bit hesitant to see as a client an intern because the worry is that they're not going to know much, they're not going to have much skill. And that often is not the case. Many of the training programs in the Chicagoland area, by the time they come to us for this kind of training experience, they've already had some other training experiences. They've done a lot of their schooling, and they are in pretty good shape. They have some skill. Not always, but we really, because of the importance of the work, we aren't going to hire people who don't demonstrate a certain level of competence. Just because they're working with people who don't have money or can't afford insurance doesn't mean that we should just throw anybody at them. We still want the same level of skill. It's our commitment to the community, and it's also our reputation. So I don't want someone out there in the field who is not in some way, hasn't demonstrated some competency already as a therapist.
Mhm. So there's always a supervisor with the intern when they're in a therapy session with a client.
No, they aren't actually, because that creates a whole separate dynamic.
Exactly.
People, right? People want to talk to someone, typically one-on-one without interference. Sometimes we will have interns make recordings of the session, and then the supervisor will listen to segments of it to give feedback, and then it's erased or destroyed or whatever. And it really is not to interfere in someone's life. It's just to help the therapist become a better therapist. But no, that intern is capable of being just on their own in the room with the client one-on-one. But they have to take good notes, or they have to do recordings so that they can get that supervision.
Mhm. And when they have meetings, how are the interns? How good are the interns at providing feedback and input?
They're actually pretty good. I've been impressed. The two interns we had this last year were both second career people. One had been in the insurance industry before, and the other one, I don't remember what their previous life was, but they were both career changers.
Mhm.
And so they had some life experience. Their input is really valuable. They also have been in school the most recently, so they have the latest knowledge infused in them because they have just been in school, or they still are.
Mhm. And Bridging the Gap Collective just recently started. So about a year ago, did you say, or a year and a half ago?
Well, the idea came to fruition, and then we had about a year and a half ago. So we
Mhm.
had to do all of the filings, put together a board, get our mission, vision, values, all of the requirements that go into having a not-for-profit function in a legal way. So that was the first part. And then we had, it's been about a year that we've been in existence, and there have been some clients who've been seen so that we haven't had interns see those clients yet. Those current interns were seeing just Juniper Center clients
Mm.
who maybe had Medicaid, but we can't accept money from anyone who's on Medicaid. That's against the law. So we would give them to our interns.
Mhm.
But they did a beautiful job. And then this year's crop of interns, we have 3 coming in. They will work in bridging the gap so that they can have that experience. And they sound pretty excited about it.
And how many interns have you had already?
In just bridging the gap.
Yes.
Well, so far we had the 2 last year, And then we'll have 3 this year, but over the years, we usually have 1 or 2 interns at the practice every year. I love having that opportunity to help people get good training and to, it's a labor of love supervising someone like that.
Absolutely. And it's a paid internship as well.
Sometimes they're paid. It depends on where they are in their training.
Mhm.
If we can pay them, we do.
Mhm.
I don't believe in people working for free. Many school programs, depending on where people are in their training, we are not allowed to pay them.
Oh, mhm.
The arrangement, because, and partly it's because the schools don't want interns to be taken advantage of. So the agreement is really clear, and it sounds like, well, if you're not paying them, aren't you taking advantage of them? Well, they're not being used for income for the practice. We
Mhm.
don't get anything. We don't get any money. The arrangement is we give them everything they need. We give them a supervisor. It costs a practice money to have that kind of intern. And I'm okay with that because, again, I think it's kind of giving back. It's that labor of love. If we can pay people, though, we do.
Mhm. If our listeners and other students want to learn more about the Juniper Center, let's say potential clients and potential interns, where should they go and where do they learn more about the Juniper Center and Virginia Gap Collective?
So you can access both through either website. The Juniper Center is just junipercenter.com. That's our website. We tried to make it very simple, just thejunipercenter.com. And Bridging the Gap is bridgingthegapcollective.com. And up it will pop. You can get to either. They're linked through, we have a link on each site so that you can get both ways because they are connected. But they have their own separate filing status. They are separate, but they have links on the website. The phone number for the practice, if people don't have access, because not everyone has a computer, not everyone has internet, that's okay. The phone number is 847-759-9110. And you can go to the front desk and our front desk person, Jessica, will route you to our access team. They will get the person registered for whichever program they're signing up for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Margo Jacquot of the Juniper Center, founder and owner of the Juniper Center. Thank you so much for joining us on WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today. And thank you for your work and much good future work for you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the time to speak about Bridging the Gap and the practice. I very much appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.